Talk about unclassy. Arts Minister Tony Burke, his federal seat is 30% Muslim. He appointed a Muslim artist, Abdul Rahman Abdullah, to the Council of the National Gallery in Canberra in September last year. Turns out this guy's an Israel hater, to say the least, posting that Israel is conducting a Holocaust against the Palestinian people, end this sickness, and Zionism, which I take to mean in the Jewish state. I don't know how else you could take it. But it turns out, I mean, there was a report about him today, but it turns out it's not the only anti-Israel hysteric on the National Gallery's board. Arts bureaucrat Esther Anatolitis tweeted just 3 weeks after the Hamas mass murder of Jews on October 7, Israeli forces set out to destroy an entire people and their culture, which is plainly untrue. She said, oh, don't equate Israel with every Jew. But still, how would the board's only Jewish member, Ilana Atlas, feel about such hatred from others on the board? How would Jewish artists feel? And should Tony Burke sack these haters?
Well, if I was a Jewish person on that board, I would feel like I did not matter one jot to this government, because if similar comments had been made about anything to do with the LGBTQ community or an Indigenous person or a woman, you would be out immediately. But you can say whatever you like about the Jewish community and the government just seemed to shrug. With Mr. Abdullah, it's not just that he seems to hate Israel, he seems to hate Australia. He called Australia a bigoted and selfish nation. Tony Burke put him on the gallery board because he said he wanted authentic leadership that reflected modern Australia. I'm not sure how those sentiments reflect modern Australia or authentic leadership. And as for Esther, she's named Andrew after a Jewish heroine who saved Israel from a genocide being plotted by a man named Haman, who was a Persian official, Persia, of course, being modern-day Iran. So the irony here is thick. These people should not be on the National Gallery board, not when they're making comments like that and they know they've got a colleague of Jewish heritage. It's completely unacceptable. It does not represent modern Australia. I'd like a government that showed authentic leadership and represented modern Australia. And Tony Burke, with his inaction, is certainly not doing that.
It's so curious to me why you've got Muslim activists so contemptuous of Australia when there's so many Muslim countries in the world they can choose from. So many. I mean, why come here if it's so bad? Why stay here if it's so bad? But Esther, sorry about that. Evelyn, what do you make of this? Should these bureaucrats be sacked for expressing such hysterically anti-Israel views, making false claims like, you know, they want to wipe out entire peoples?
I think that this is a symptom of a bigger problem. And I think it's a symptom of the degradation of our culture over here in Australia. And I think that, you know, too often Australians hide behind the facade of multiculturalism. And I just think it is just not simply going to do moving forward. You know, at some point, Australians will need to recognise what is and what is not Australian culture. You know, I think that the notion that all cultures and all religions and all worldviews are equal just needs to be tossed in the bin. You know, most people, you would hope, know that that's not the case, but until we dispose of this pluralism, of this idea that we have to be tolerant of all ideas and all thoughts, you know, until we dispose of that, we're only going to separate ourselves from the things that make our country so great and have historically made our country so great. And I think that this is just a symptom of a bigger problem, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I got to pull you both up, I think. James, I don't often do this, but you said this guy's not representative of modern culture. I'm afraid he is. I mean, our modern elite culture is, you know, pooping all over Australia. I mean, that is part of the problem.
I don't like modern Australia.
Andrew, I think if you define modern Australia by the very loud voice of a very small group of cultural elites, then sure. But mainstream Australia is the complete antithesis to much of the noise we hear from our university academics or our celebrity class. Modern Australia Mainstream Australia does not think this way at all and is incredibly frustrated with a government that has allowed that minority voice to become what seems to be modern Australia.
Evelyn Rae, James McPherson, thank you very much to you both.